Peter Horan, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today. Maybe to kind of kick things off, to give everybody a little bit more of a broad view strokes of who Peter is, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background. I know we've chatted a couple times, so I'm excited to really dig in more, but maybe you can give us an idea of kind of where you've started and where you've kind of come through in your career of working and everything else, just to give everybody a bright light onto what you've been up to.
Sure. And I guess I'd start by saying maybe my career has been sort of this intersection of luck and good decisions. Like so many things, right? So luck in that I chose to go to college at the University of Santa Clara in the early 1970s. And it was a good school, but it was based on where I could get financial aid. It was sort of how I could be as far away from my parents as possible and remain within the state of California because I had a scholarship. So went to Santa Clara. But simultaneously, that became the early days of the rise of Silicon Valley. So the phrase Silicon Valley was invented by Don Heffler during the time that I was at Santa Clara. And so then it was like, all this interesting stuff is going on. Maybe I ought to focus on that. And so by the late 1970s, I'd sort of decided that, I really was going to take a good hard run at working around technology. So obscure claim to fame. I wrote the owner's manual for Pong in 1975. I sold kit computers on the floor of the second West Coast Computer Fair in San Jose in 77. Marketed cell phones in the early 80s. When I was running the Microsoft ad account worldwide for Ogilvy and Mather, I helped launch Windows and Windows apps and Office and all that stuff. So I was really in advertising for the first 10, 12 years of my career. Then I spent most of the 90s in traditional publishing. I was the head of major account sales for International Data Group. We operated in 77 countries around the world, which was actually a really interesting time to be there because that coincided with the rise of the internet, the rise of satellite television. And so companies had to really confront a lot of issues around, how do I manage my brand across borders? And previously they'd done things like, we'll launch in the US in May, we'll launch in UK, France, Britain in October, we'll do rest of world sometime next year. And now they suddenly had to confront the fact that we were all rest of world. And whatever they said in one market became immediately known everywhere. And so, and if I say, I'm launching this new product and it's not available, they say, you know what, I'm going to sit this one out. I'll wait until you've got the new product available. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff where suddenly with this which was kind of the first big step towards transparency. And it really, it created both opportunities and challenges. And then since 2000, which shockingly is now 20 years, I've been focused on the internet. Perfect timing. In the spring of 2000, I quit a steady job and started a venture-backed web media startup company and went right into the teeth of the first nuclear winter of the internet. But then, actually, as I say, I hit the CEO trifecta, survived, got it profitable, and walked out the door to my own power, which puts me in the top 5% of the class anyway. Went back to New York, did a turnaround on About.com, sold that to the New York Times, did a couple of various startups and deals here, then ran all the media and advertising properties for IAC, Barry Diller's company, Interactive Corp, which is brands like City Search, Evite, Ask Jeeves. And then really the last 10 years, I've been doing a combination of consulting, board work, and investing. And most notably, I've been on the board of LendingTree as we've taken that from a sub-$100 million market cap when we spun out of IAC in 2008 to about a $4 billion market cap today. So number summary, $2 billion in transactions on the sell side, $1 billion in transactions on the buy side, and about $4 billion of public market value creation.
That's amazing. We should just open up a class and we should just sit around and listen to what you've got to tell us, because for everything you've shared right now, I'm already beyond intrigued. I'm a huge fan of Pong back in the day, so I'm even more impressed that you created the manual for it.
Like we needed, go to the right, go to the left, bounce.
So basically, it was the whole use case scenario on how to operate Pong in the most simplest form ever.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, what's interesting about that, though, and it does speak to some of the issues facing early stage investing. So I say I've been involved in 5 or 6 technology revolutions: personal computers, cell phones, graphical user interface, the internet, mobile. And in all of them, with the exception of Pong, people could say they adamantly did not want whatever it was we were selling. And I've still got a focus group report I did for Commodore, for the Commodore PET, the personal electronic translator, 1977, first personal computer, where people said, I can't imagine needing a personal computer. What would I want that for? You know, when we launched cell phones in the early 80s, people were like, you know, not interested at all. I don't need one of those. You know, maybe if I was a big time lawyer or a sales guy, I could use one, but I'm an average person. I need a cell phone. You know, we asked people, do you want to be able to see on your screen what you're going to see on the paper? They said, no, because I got WordPerfect. I got 1, 2, 3. I don't need that stuff. And so where that really goes to is the challenges that particularly entrepreneurs are facing, where they're trying to, you know, do something really new, and they're trying to convince investors that, you know, that people will actually buy this. And you go out and ask people, do you want this? And they're going to say no. And so it's that sort of, you know, how do you bridge that how do you convince investors to sort of share your vision of, you know, how you're going to change the world? And that is like one of the most, like I said, for genuinely innovative stuff, that's one of the biggest challenges.
Oh, 100% agree with that. When you start to shift and everybody's looking for the most innovative, biggest change, they think that this is the way to go. The problem is, the big elephant in the room is change.
Yeah.
People are very afraid of change. Change is actually one of the highest stress causes because, and I was having this call today with a company, and they were building this platform. It's massive. And it was interesting because at the end of it all, I said, what is the one little thing you're solving? Because right now it just seems like this big. And by the time everybody gets through this, they're going to be so stressed that if you just take a little nibble and grow with them, people will accept that better.
Yep.
And there's
was finding that one problem that people desperately need to solve.
Exactly.
And I'll call it a quick timeout for a story, which is both heartening and terrifying for entrepreneurs. And it's that when Airbnb came out of the Y Combinator incubator, nobody would vote for them. Nobody would invest in them. They were like, oh no, this is stupid. This will never happen.
Really?
Yeah. And so, you know, and so you say on the one hand, it's like, oh my God, it's like if Airbnb couldn't get anybody to see, you know, what am I going to do? On the other hand, it's like, well, guess what? Everybody said no, and they went ahead anyway, and they became successful.
For sure.
But there is sort of that gap, though, of explaining to people what you're going to do and why they should believe you're going to do it.
Exactly. And I think there's a really interesting trend that's actually happened now, is that since that time, entrepreneurship was also a tough space to get into, and everybody believed it. Big business was, I'm not going to have you as a customer because you're going to fail. So you take that 10, 15 years ago, even when I went on my own to where it is today, risk has changed so much, and the demand for innovation and new has shifted a lot. So I think if you took what's going on now, more people are jumping onto almost idiotic ideas because they don't want to, the fear of losing out, the MOFO or FOMO and all that stuff. They don't want to lose that. So now the ability to grasp onto things that aren't really functional and maybe properly embedded to be a business or a startup, people are jumping into because they're afraid, oh, if I don't do this, it's not right. I better sign up. I better be part of it.
Yeah.
Interesting that you say that change back then was, I think it wasn't adaptive and it wasn't as fast as it is today. And I think now we're starting to see that tech is getting in and failing fast just because they're not getting the next investment, because they're not finding attraction. They're not finding the usership, and they might be 5 years before time. They might be 10 years ahead of time because the change hasn't got there, but change is rapidly occurring.
Yeah. And I guess I'm focused on kind of the narrow thing we're talking about, which is entrepreneurs, early stage companies going out to raise money, and especially angels and seed fund stage, and that's where I think, and the sort of, I'll say there's kind of the Silicon Valley exceptions. I was just looking at a company called Neva, which is founded by two ex-Google guys, and they're a long way from a product. They raised $37.5 million.
Wow.
But they're not like you and me. It's like I used to, one of the partners at one of the first VC firms I dealt with was a former NBA player. And he'd say, why basketball players date supermodels? No, John, why? Because they can. And the same thing is true. Like if you're a former early employee at Google, an SVP at Google, you're going to do a startup. So yeah, give me $50 million. And people go, yes, thank you. So why do they do it? Because they can. But that doesn't mean that most people have the ability to go out and say, oh, give me $10 million or $5 million. It's like most people have got to go and sweat to raise the first $500,000 and million. And that's really, I think, what sort of like in the real world, that's actually the challenge, right? Because it's like, okay, if I can get into a market, if I can get a product out there, I can start to get some proof points, then I can start to put up some numbers. And this concept I had that sounded crazy, I can demonstrate that people really want it. But it's that sort of, it's the first $1 million of revenue. It's the first $1 million of funding is where kind of a lot of stuff falls on the floor.
For sure. And I completely agree with that. There's also raising the hardest is raising your first $1 million, and getting your first $1 million in revenue seems to be a bit easier, but then the next allotment is even harder. You've got some traction, but how do you get the expansion? So there's a lot of moving pieces inside of this. And so I think one of the things I want to kind of backtrack a little bit to was what got you interested in actually investing versus working with these companies. You were working in the space. You were doing a lot of innovative things, of course. You were in Silicon Valley. You were leading up some of these top products that were coming to market. Yep. What changed you over from being kind of dug into that market and deciding you wanted to invest?
And I'll say most of what I know about investing comes from scar tissue. It's like, it's all the stuff I did wrong on the way. And I'll say, I'd worked with a lot of VCs over time. And then a couple of them decided that in the 2006, 7, 8 timeframe, this notion of, hey, we could do these kind of lightweight companies and we could flip them. So let's like raise only a little bit of money, 18, 24 months, sell it for $30 million. We're going to get rich. No, I mean, it sounded really good. And the guys that were proposing this were smart. And like, this was like companies like, for example, if you remember Clout with a K, that was one of the companies. So it was a lot of, it's like conceptually, it's like, yeah, this ought to work. And it never worked out as well as we thought it would. The things I learned is that you've got to, there's no easy, it's like you may get lucky and there's an easy flip. We just had one of those with a company called The Wild up here in Portland, which is a VR company. Just so happened that they basically got to first product and somebody said, oh, that's exactly what we need. Thank you. We want to buy it. But, that happens 3 times in 10 years. There's a version of like a bumper sticker in early stage investing, which is that lemons ripen much more quickly than peaches. And it's just the notion that, the ones that are going to fail, they tend to fail fast and ugly. And the ones that so one of my best companies I've been in for 7 years now. And in fact, another company I've been for 10 years, and they've been good investments. They're good companies, but 10 years later, we're still running them. And so I think, so I was wrong about this notion that early stage investing was about quick flips. And
that's some good learning.
I'm sorry?
That's some good learning. I think everybody goes in with how they want to envision investing because they come in it from so many different angles. And you were able to go in with this approach that maybe you could buy and sell quickly realizing that this is more of a long-term play, and
Yeah.
you're coming in at the bottom, which is really starting off really early, that there's a long-term play that could happen here. And if you try and speed things up, it may not always work. Like you said, 3 in 10 years it may, but there is a little bit more of a longer game. So how do you start to build companies in a portfolio that fit into different time sequences? You know what, maybe I could see this one out in 3, this one out in 5, and this one out in 10. And then I can balance my portfolio.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I wanted to chat about, which is that mindset matters in this environment. That in the pandemic with the lockdown and incarceration, it's hard to raise, it's hard to do a big round, particularly if you didn't start it before. So I'm in 3 venture funds where I'm on the investment committee, and we do direct investing. And I've seen a number of follow-on rounds. So the mindset of VCs during this period, the first thing was, okay, freeze, don't do anything. Second thing was triage on the current portfolio. And the kind of the simplistic way to think about it is red, yellow, green. They go through their current portfolio and go, okay, who's going to be helped by this? Who is neutral and we'll see, and who's screwed? And they just looked at it and they said, okay. And so the first priority for investable capital became, I'll say, portfolio maintenance and support. So the first thing is, okay, how much of our capital do we need to get our promising companies through this pandemic? And one of the maxims is basically don't reinforce failure. And so if you got companies that are struggling anyway, and it doesn't look like, this is like we're treading water and then we're tossing them a boat anchor. It's like, okay, just let it go. It's like you don't spend more money propping up a company that's going to fail anyway. But on the other hand, say, okay, one of my companies, we've got this exercise of, okay, for stage 1 was we cut cost and we got to our cash flow break even. And stage 2 was, okay, now that we've proven we're break even to profitable, how can we accelerate out of this downturn and come out of it stronger than we went into it? And so we're in the middle of that now. But that's sort of the kind of mindset of most of the investors I've talked to. So things that are on the negative side, concerns about sale process. And so folks that have come in and said, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this enterprise sale. And we're like, okay, so how is it gonna work to push a new enterprise sale through when people are working remotely, when, in certain categories, right? I was being pitched by a company that's in the travel space. And I'm like, okay, well, we've already lost 2020. I said, suppose we lose 2021 as well. I said, what happens to your business if 2021 is still locked down? And so there are certain categories that are a greater concern. But what's interesting is, and this is sort of the anti-flip mentality, this is a good time to go in with a business plan and say, hey, you know what? I can go in with a lean team and a moderate raise. And while we're on timeout anyway, I can build. I said, so I'm going to go build my product. And when we come out of this in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, I'll be ready to go to market. And so I can make a little bit of money last a long time. I'm going to code my ass off. I'm going to build something. And when we come out the other side, then we'll be ready. Then we'll go raise a bigger round for marketing and sales and acceleration. And so that kind of a mindset I'm finding to be attractive to investors right now. The, tight team, talented people, and just focus on and build product. The other theory I've invested against is markets that are open to change because of the pandemic. And sometimes it's counterintuitive. So, small business has gotten hammered. But a company I invested in recently called Candid Wholesale, I invested both directly and via Cascade Angels, they're in the brand to retailer e-commerce segment. And the premise was that because of all the challenges that retail's been facing with all the shutdowns that now these retailers who before were like, hey, I'm up to my eyeballs, I'm busy, I don't have time to change, are now going, okay, what do I need to do to survive this? And so we've actually had a tremendous amount of interest from small retailers because they're going, okay, I'm in trouble, I've got to change, I got to do something. Interestingly, through one of my companies, business.com, which is a website helps big companies market to SMBs, restaurant retail point of sale systems has actually been a really, really strong category. And it would frankly surprise the hell out of us because we're like, what? It's like, isn't that a dead category? But again, all of a sudden restaurants are having to go, hey, we've got to figure out how to do touchless sales. We've got to figure out how to, do remote ordering. And suddenly it's like, oh yeah, the people walking in, standing in line, handing me cash, that's not going to work. And so that's also what we look for is, okay, what are the changes that, what changes are being forced on the market? We're supposed to got to look for new solutions. And those are attractive for looking at right now.
Those are great, and I think there's some adaptability that's going to happen inside of this as well, right? Over the next 3 to 4 months, as we kind of hopefully move our way out, you're going to start to see, are people really shifting to this stay-at-home model forever, or are they going to shift it back, and you're going to start to see maybe they're 6 feet, but then in a week there's going to be 1 foot. Like everybody's going to go back to what they know. So there's this real fear of, do I have to shift so much that I'm changing everything, building new things, putting my store up a different way, if everybody's going to bounce back to the way they were shopping, commuting, and walking around? So I think there's that risk. And how far do you take it before actually things open back up again?
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you look at the current virus data, we're nowhere as close to opening back up again, or at least we're going to probably lock down before we open back up again. And, one of my companies, I was talking to CEOs where I said, well, when are you going to reopen, do you think? When you open the office? He goes, well, we were hoping for August, but the employees were afraid because they're in office towers in New York and Portland. And they said, if we had our own building, ground floor, park in the parking lot, walk through the front entrance, walk to your desk, that's one thing. But, our guys, they probably got to come in on a light rail system. They've got to, go up in an elevator that we don't control. They've got, and so
too many variables.
Realistically, I don't know if we're reopening this year.
Wow. Well, it's interesting. The environment's going to dictate a lot of how the investment community is working and the companies that they are investing in. I think you're right. There's going to be some further out plays that people can invest in by building a team, building a structure, taking their time, being in the background, building it up so that they're ready to launch when all of this is kind of downsized. But that just creates an opportunity to maybe take over some of the depleted assets or depleted areas that aren't going to get attention right now.
Sure.
And then, of course, there's the other factors of the areas that are getting a lot of upside, right? Like Zoom and all these places where people are investing, they're going after it because they say, hey, if this is going to be the new norm, we need to be fitting inside of here. So I guess
telehealth, telemedicine, everybody wants to get into anything that enhances. If you think about it, in some ways, Zoom is a pretty blunt instrument. I mean, we use it and it's great, but we also all are starting to build this like long list of, gee, I really wish it would do this, or boy, it's, and in a sense, they may be they could be the MySpace of social networking, right?
Sure.
Kind of that's what it looks like. And then Facebook comes in behind and goes, okay, wait, here's what it's really supposed to be. But I think, I hear a lot of folks say, what, I'm not rushing to get on airplanes. I'm hearing clients on the buy side going, hey, you know what? You don't actually have to come out here. We can do this kind of a meeting. It'll be just fine. Thanks.
No, that's exciting because the world's needed a little bit of a pause and a little bit of shift and a little bit of change here and there. And I think those are all hitting everybody quite quickly. So
yeah,
it's good to see that people are taking their health into consideration, but also realizing that business still works on video and that you can still conduct things and move it forward.
Yep.
Now, You kind of jumped in on how you started investing and how this is all unfolded. Now, is there a part that really drives you, that gets you excited about it? And I can tell you're excited and you're passionate about startups and the community, which is awesome. But is there something that really is your favorite part of investing that you can talk to?
Yeah, it's working with entrepreneurs is actually really, it sounds dumb and obvious, but you do this because you want to help entrepreneurs realize their vision. In your questions, you asked about sort of the financial side of it versus the, mentoring, coaching side of it. I've got some where it's like, no, just write a check and, write if you get work. But in a lot of cases, it's, being a sounding board, helping them to think through the strategy, because, being a small business CEO is a pretty lonely job a lot of the time. And, and sometimes like you gotta have somebody you can say, okay, I've had this like scary thought, this may be wrong, or, what happens if this happens, and they can't talk to their team about it. And also sometimes even later on, if they get like a professional VC, and not that I'm not a professional VC, but they're sort of the classic Silicon Valley VC, and the CEO won't necessarily want to talk to them. Because I always say, it's like Silicon Valley VCs, they always say, oh yeah, it's like they tell all sorts of lies on their website, right on the front page. First one is, we don't care stage or industry. We're just looking for great people with great ideas. We're stage. But then if you actually look, you say, okay, well, where'd you actually invest? It's like, no, they invest in a very specific stage, a couple of industries, a couple of patterns. It's like, but one of the other things, they'll say is, and we care about our companies. We are here to support. And I said, yeah, but Silicon Valley VCs care about their companies the way a poker player cares about his cards. If I think they're going to make me money, I keep them and I invest behind them. If I think they're not going to make me money, I throw them away. And, and so as a CEO, you just have to, it's not inherently a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you don't understand that's the way the game is played. And so, it's important for early stage CEOs to develop a group of people they trust. And we met through Ash Carberfushian from Watch Mojo. And so for something like 10 years, he's been sort of on the bat phone, or I've been on the other end of the bat phone. And it's like, oh wait, somebody called. They want to acquire me. You think I should sell? Or, what do you think? And, and he knows, and he's a fabulous entrepreneur and a great guy. But what he counts on me is I'll call the no mercy, no malice conversation. And it's like, okay, here's what I'm really thinking, and here's what I'm really afraid of, and what do you think? And I'll disagree with him. I'll say, yes, you're right, you're wrong, whatever. But it's just a no holds barred conversation. And early stage CEOs need to cultivate people that they trust and that they count on to look out for them and their interest. Because their interest could be different than the employee's interest. It could be different than their investor's interest. It could be, it's like, and they got to have somebody that they can talk to and honestly say, okay, here's what I'm thinking.
I like that. And the no mercy, no malice conversation. And there's been a lot of times in over the last decade or two where different entrepreneurs or different businesses will come in and they'll say, how do I really infiltrate this community of entrepreneurs and startups and get them to want to talk to me and open up and share things? And I'm always kind of about, you got to have a balance of value. I got to be able to provide you with something and provide something back to me. And then we've got an equal balance in a relationship. And when you talk about a VC, they're providing the financial stability to run your company. So it's hard to go back and tell them, hey, I'm thinking about taking the company in a whole different direction. I know we're making money, but I'm going to go this way.
Yeah.
It kind of sets them off. But if you have somebody that can be on the outside and you're exchanging value through ideas and concepts, it is a good way of testing the water, but also learning on what their perspective is, because they're not biased to their bank account. They're biased to helping you succeed. And I think a lot of the time an entrepreneur feels the fear of, who can I really tell something to? And they ball it up. And then you get this bigger thing, which is now becoming a little bit more prevalent, which is mental health issues and things
sure.
like that. So I really do agree and respect that, you got to work with that entrepreneur to give them the concept that they got to find a few people to trust, and they got a few people that they can bounce ideas off of. And that goes across inside their business, outside their business, and advisors, and et cetera. So it's really important these days, I think, to get as much bonding, if you can, with a few people that are going to help you.
Yep.
And I love the fact that you said that it's someone else that has your back. That is so important, that you have no idea as an entrepreneur when you think you're in this tower by yourself, that if you've got somebody that's down there trying to find a trampoline for you to bounce off of, that that they're going to come with it, right? And I think the fear is that I'm here alone. So I like that.
No, and that's actually, and you're right, there's actually been a lot of studies about sort of mental health issues among founders for that reason. They feel like they're by themselves, and and they're a point where any sane person wants to run screaming for the door, and if you're by yourself, you get totally in a ball. You don't want to go to your spouse and say, "Honey, I think I'm going to lose the whole business, and we're going to be bankrupt and living in the car." It's like you put that conversation off. You don't want to go to your investors right away and say, "Hey, I'm afraid this product won't work." Or at least you want to be able to rehearse the conversation before you talk to them.
Agreed. But I like the fact that you're opening the door and that you're allowing and wanting that to occur. That's really beneficial to the entrepreneur for sure.
Yeah.
You've shared a bunch of different stories kind of along the way in your career and how you've been working with startups. And is there any real heartfelt story that you can really say that, this startup did X, they hit the wall, we came in, we did a brainstorm, and man, they really turned it around, and this company's really gone this way. But there's been some real heartfelt story that you could share that really kind of depicts the lifestyle of an entrepreneur and where they start and where they kind of go to.
So one of my all-time favorite entrepreneurs is a fellow named Rafat Ali. And he founded Paid Content back in the day, sold that to The Guardian. Like a lot of acquisitions, it sort of doesn't always work. The folks that are acquired, they like cashing the check, but they don't enjoy working for the big company that just bought them. And so he left that, and he was going through a lot of personal stuff, and we were talking about what do you want to do next. And he sort of had a notion for a travel company, a travel news company. And it was like, okay, well, tell you what, I knew he was going to go walkabout for a while. And so we sat down and concepted it and said, tell you what, let's hold this. And when you come back from your walkabout, then we'll start again. And so came back and we went to a vegan tea house in Manhattan and said, okay, what are we going to call it? What are we going to do? And I wrote him a $25,000 check on the spot, which is his first money. And it ultimately has become, in spite of all the chaos of the travel industry, it's become over 6 or 7 years one of the most trusted and respected sources of news and information about the travel industry. Conferences, and now of course we're going through another phase of reinvention because of everything there. But and what was interesting was we started out, and this is 7 or 8 years ago, we said, we got to be a big data company. And so we're going to raise $1 million now, and then we'll come back, we'll raise a bigger round, and we'll get into data. And it turned out that we never could raise a bigger round. And one of something that's important for entrepreneurs to understand is that rightly or wrongly, venture investing is a fashion business. And, it's like the movies, right? They say, oh, we can't do a cowboy movie. Everybody hates cowboy movies. Then a cowboy movie comes along. It's like, oh, wait, where's my cowboy movie? Get me more cowboy movies. Until they basically just squeeze all the juice out of it. And then it's like, all right, give me a horror movie. But VCs tend to do the same thing. It's like when a Sequoia invests in a certain category, everybody else goes, oh my God, where's one like that? And the other hand, when they say, we're not doing media investments anymore, or big data, that was last year. when you're not sort of on trend with VC investment, it gets really, really hard to sell. So what happened was, and I've had this a couple times where it's like, it's a categorical problem. It's like, the business was hitting its numbers, but it's like, oh yeah, we're not doing media investments. So with Skift, what we did is we actually just hunkered down. Those of us that were already around the table wrote more checks and said, no, we're fine. We still believe in you. And so we put in we can raise up like another $1 million or $2 million. And so the good news is that's all the money we raised. And so, we probably could have gone out and raised an A round and been diluted. But instead, all the folks that were in early still own most of the company. And it's become a very successful, very valuable company.
Oh, that's awesome. So sometimes you have to retrench, figure out what you want to do. If there's a pivot in there, there is. But if other people aren't finding the value, then hopefully the people that have already been in there can see and still believe in the CEO and believe in the team, which is what you talked about as being important. Then you guys stuck behind that, and look what happened. They were able to overcome those barriers and grow it and find more value.
Yeah. No, it's like that's one of the things is you invest in people. And a good entrepreneur, first of all, it's got to be somebody that you can trust. It's got to be somebody that you want to work with over a period of time. And adaptability, there's one of my favorite bad movies is Heartbreak Ridge. And there's a bumper sticker there, adapt, improvise, overcome. And that is the bumper sticker for an entrepreneur, adapt, improvise, overcome. Because, nothing ever happens the way your business plan says it's going to. And so the successful entrepreneurs are the ones that go, oh, that sucks. Sorry, now I'll try this. And they stay at it and keep working the problem.
It's pivot, 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 right? In your mind, you're pivoting more than the company actually is pivoting because you're always trying to reinvent yourself, especially in your own mind as an entrepreneur. And I love that. Adapt, improvise, and overcome. Instead of waiting to hit the wall, hopefully you're doing that on a regular basis, challenging your teams, and that'll help you keep moving forward.
Yeah, well, let me give you a good personal story on that one. Actually, I wish it was my personal story, but it's a friend's personal story. I was having breakfast with a fellow named Bill Losey in New York number of years ago now. And I just seen that Pinterest had raised, another round of money. And I said, oh, congratulations. It's going really well. He goes, it's funny. He goes, I've been in that for 5 years. He goes, for 4 years and 9 months of that, I was going to write it off. I thought it was going nowhere. He goes, it was the 6th or 7th pivot that finally caught. He goes, so he said, at any point, if we'd all sort of lost faith, you never would have heard of Pinterest. He goes, but it's only because and some of it was they had enough money in the bank. It wasn't a huge amount, but they managed it well. And so they sort of had bought themselves the time to keep working the problem until they figured it out.
And sometimes you're not going to define the problem right away. You think it's one way, and you're going to kind of slowly maneuver once you learn about it. You got to be in the space a long time. This one company that was doing that I was talking to today, and they were kind of going through the whole big picture, and they told me that these are the 3 roadblocks we keep hitting, and we've crossed the 1 barrier, and we're proving to everybody that we belong here. And I said, you know what? You're probably not going to know you're a business until about 5 years. So I said, in this plan, when you're talking to people, make sure they understand that you're going to be here for 5 years because it's going to take them that long for this tech to catch up to everybody else. You're so far advanced that the only way you're going to survive is by having a plan that's going to get you 5 years, because then that's going to build traction, and those clients are going to start dumping their money in because you're solving a big problem that right now is fear is preventing them from using you.
Well, now behind this as an idea, one of the pieces of advice that I give to founders that they always resist. Most business plans, financial plans we get are priced for perfection. It's sort of, okay, everything's going to go exactly according to plan, and I'm going to raise an A round for $20 million, and And I'm like, okay, so actually 2 bits of advice. One is be really specific about how you're going to use this money to get you to the point where you can raise an A round. What are the milestones that you have to hit to be able to raise your next round of funding? And don't tell me how many months this is. Tell me what you have to accomplish. But then the second thing is, and then hold back 20%. Don't spend it all. Hold back 20% because, to your point, no, you'll have to actually, reinvent the product at least once. You'll be just about ready to go, and then COVID hits. And it's like, the number 1, 2, and 3 rules of being a venture CEO is don't run out of cash.
Yes.
And so, and they're always like, well, no, I need to have that money. I need to spend that money. It's like, and even the VCs, yeah, spend it. But you always got to have a little bit left in your back pocket. So you got that little bit more time to either go get a better deal in the next round or fix the product or get one more customer. But don't plan on sort of running out of fumes and immediately stepping into an A round.
It almost seems like somewhere along the line of how the startups, when they first start and they're working through all of these different problems, one of the things that I find that would be really helpful is if they had some financial planning, a way to better understand how the finance works. Because when you've been working your butt off for no money for the last year and a half or the last year, you go and you raise this big chunk of coin, and then you think, man, I've made it. What you don't realize is that that's just the smallest part of your made it part. You've got a lot of growth that you got to get to, and you got to be able to hit those other stages, and you got to prove your model all the way through. And I wonder if there's, I've never seen it, but some small little, I don't know if it's a walkthrough, a coach, a presentation, something that just says, here, you've got 500,000, store 100,000, you can't touch that. This 400,000 is all you got to build your company for the next year. The 100,000, that is basically going to sit in that bank account for the next 10 years, and you're going to keep growing that 10, 20% a year because you can't spend it. That's your emergency fund. Yep. Everything else, if you don't have it, it's gone. So you better work your ass off on that 400,000.
Well, that's exactly the advice. That is exactly the advice I keep giving to people, and they keep pushing back on because
so true.
Because, like I said, if you give them 500,000, they want to spend 525,000.
Yep.
And it's like, no. Like, hold some back.
This was probably, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years ago. There was a gentleman, his name's Chris Carter. Big fan. He works at Schulich. He's bought and sold his company a few different times. But he had this story or realism that he did. And what he said to the company was, he said, here, look, I'm going to give you $200,000. And I'm going to pay you personally money out of that money based on the amount of money you have left in a year. And the reason being is that he wanted them to build and grow and make revenue so that they would protect that 200,000 like it was the last 200,000, because he's going to give them a percentage of that just as a bonus. And if you've got nothing left, you get nothing out of it. But if you leave some money, I'm going to give you some of it, and outside of what you're being paid. And I thought that that was pretty clever. And the reason being is there's this mindset of stress that's driven from managing money or having to pay for bills and not knowing what's going to happen in 6 months or 8 months. Yep. And I think that if you can take away that stress of the finance without just saying, here's all these gobs of money, but managing it, I think that probably would allow that entrepreneur to be more active and being able to figure out ways to solve problems quicker, generate revenue and profitable faster, versus saying, I got money in the bank, so let's try this and let's try this. There isn't that urgency.
There's a lot of overfunded startups, particularly in the Valley of the US, because having so much money takes away the urgency to solve problems. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you've got, $500,000 or $1 million, then to your earlier point, you can solve one problem well, and you better solve it fast. Mm. If you've got $30 million, you can sit around and think big thoughts about, so what do we want to be when we grow up? And what do we do? Let's get an office. Let's get marble on the floors. We're big guys. We need, company cars. And as an investor, it's, way back in the early days of Silicon Valley, the first investment banking firm was Hambrecht & Quist. And, they invested directly, and then, also were bankers. But I was talking to one of the partners, George Quist, and what he said is, we don't like to invest until the entrepreneur has already put all of their own money into the company. So we invest after they've mortgaged their house, maxed their credit cards, broken into the kids' piggy banks. And when they sort of fully understand that their life will be a smoking hole in the ground if they fail, then we'll put money in.
Yeah. And that creates an urgency.
Yeah.
It's fire. It lights a fire under your ass because you don't want to go back to where you didn't want to be, right? So
right.
I always say myself, I'm living on the brink of destruction every day because if I don't have something kicking me in the butt, what's going to drive me to wake up and do something more tomorrow? And I literally been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of weeks. And one of them was, what creates an urgency? Why do people say I got to launch this next week? I'm like, one, you can't even feasibly do it in a week, but why do you got to launch next week? You've got like 4 weeks. Why don't you do it in 4 weeks? And what I liked about the urgency of creating a date that's not achievable is that you will work harder to achieve it, regardless of anything you've put behind it. There might have to be nothing, right? You might open the door and it's achieved and that's it. You're like, there's nothing here. I thought you were like, had billions of ad spend dollars. You didn't have that? So it's the fact that the urgency creates you to work harder, your teams to combine together to find the solution and make it work. So I think we always have to create an urgency. It seems to be the only way that gets the light going and gets everybody moving forward quicker.
What you're bringing up triggers another thought, which is the why now. Because so the other sort of dirty little secret of investors is VCs have a no-cost option on your company. You come in and say, I have this great plan. Oh, gee, that's really nice. And you say, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this. Great. So come back when you do this and this, and then show me again. And you come back and say, okay, well, I did these things. Oh, that's great. What do you do next? Oh, we're going to sell this customer. We think we can sell that company. Cool. Tell you what. So after you talk to those guys, come back and see me again. And so, a lot of VCs, what they're doing is they're saying, all right, just, you keep building the company on your dime. And it's like we're playing poker and the entrepreneur has got to like keep anteing and putting money in. And the VC only has to decide if they're going to put money in after they see the cards. And so one of the things that entrepreneurs need to really think about is that, in the classic, or else is, and I have a term sheet, and so if you want to play, you got to write the check now. But they need to sort of be conscious of why they need to do this right now, but also why does an investor need to come to the table now? Why is it different? Why should the investor not wait longer to see more of the developments?
No, that's a good point. And you're right. It's mitigating. Is it, if I mitigate the risk by doing all of these things, does that mean they're going to ask for more things? Or if I prove this, will they jump in? So how do I create enough urgency that we're mutually meeting in the middle and their dollars are going to help us strive further and faster, but I'm not going to get pushed to, hey, can you do this thing for me as well, which eats away another 3 months. And then maybe they choose not to because they had found another company that was on a higher growth trajectory.
Yeah, well, a classic example of these kind of asymmetrical economies is in the pharmaceutical industry. And so, it always makes a headline when some little biotech company is sold for $300 million to Amgen. But what's happening is, so probably $20 billion was invested, and most of those companies failed. But the one that succeeded, that company got a huge return. From the big company side, it's like, okay, as opposed to me taking on the risk of developing all these drugs and seeing what'll work, what'll get through stage 3 FDA trials, whatever, I'll just wait and I'll pay a premium for the winners. But it's now a no risk deal because, it's already done, it works, it's already approved. So fine, so I'll just pay more for it, and then I'll overcharge the consumers. But that is the same model works, by the way, in oil. The historic wildcatter out with his burrow in the desert, he takes all the risk, and if he fails, his bones bleach in the desert. Nobody ever sees him except for the vultures. But if he succeeds, he gets rich, and a big oil company pays him for the claim he found. But it's like few successes, huge payouts, and a lot of other stuff just gets washed out.
No, I like that. And I think that in time, there's a lot of learning that comes through this. And I'm going to say that the first time you did it to the second business, to the third business, each time is going to be a little bit different, and you're going to get different people coming after you and different ways to solve problems.
Yep.
And different money thrown at different times. It'll never work out to be the exact same pattern the first time, the second time, or the third time. And I guess that's what makes business exciting. I want to do one thing, which I think will be a little bit different. We're going to call this rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of quick questions.
Okay.
Just rapid fire and answer. No thought, just boom. And then that way we solve some of the other questions, and then I got one last big question for you.
All right.
How's that work?
Go.
All right. How many companies or dollars do you invest per year?
Directly, I probably do 5 or 6 companies. Via the various funds where I work in, it's maybe another $20 million a year.
Perfect. Do you do follow-up investments, and how much of the portfolio, percentage-wise?
Yes. And that's something I didn't start out intending to do follow-on investments, but I realized my good companies would need follow-on. It's probably a third.
Okay. I like it. Any notable companies that you have in your portfolio that you want to share that are worth the 2 seconds to answer?
A kid's book about. It's a new business model book publishing company, and it made the investment early, and then it came out just in time. And it's parents. It's books to help parents have tough conversations with their kids. It came out, but it already launched, and then COVID came, and we did a COVID book, gave it away for free to build a database. And then the founder, who is biracial, wrote a brilliant book on racism, just in time for the Black Lives Matter movement. And it was the #1 book on Amazon. And so the company has just exploded.
Awesome. I love it. Any verticals do you focus on specifically?
Our company is Horan Media Tech Advisors. So we started out doing mostly media, ad technology, things like that. Lately, we're doing a lot of consumer products.
Consumer, okay. Do you lead rounds?
No, not really. I mean, through some of the funds we work with, we do, but individually, no.
Do you take board seats?
Occasionally. My time is a scarce resource, so I've got I do some, but not typically.
What other things outside of money do you do to help your startup companies that you invest in?
Yeah, we have what we call the bat phone. It's like, so for a lot of them, it's, it's everything from sort of introductions, it's to other funding. So we're helping them raise another round. It's meeting customers and partners, find people.
Do you have any preferred terms?
Not really. Done some priced rounds lately, which is good. But I'd say the most common terms are convertible notes.
Okay. That's actually one last question. One thing that nobody will know about you that you want to share.
They don't know it about me because I didn't want to share it.
One notable thing. I always use I can hold my breath for 3 minutes underwater. But just something crazy that people will be like, that's amazing.
I have non-intersecting circles of friends. And when they so I'm a professional photographer, and I do a lot of stuff in the outdoors. I'm environmental, I lead national outings for the Sierra Club. And through social media periodically, the circles intersect. And it's like, so the CEO of one of my companies out of Palo Alto was out with a fly fishing guide. And all of a sudden the fly fishing goes, "Oh, you know Peter Horan?" He goes, and Chris goes, "Yeah." He goes, "How do you know Peter?" "Oh, because I saw a picture he took of this mountain and da-da-da." And Chris is like, "Oh, well, he's on my board of directors." But it was sort of these two people that sort of, it was like a random harmonic convergence of stuff. But like I said, it's like, and sometimes I'll see these like discussions where it's like, oh, these people actually knew who the other one was. This would be a really fun conversation. But they sort of bumped into each other because I've got, like I said, these sort of random, non-contiguous circles.
I love it. Well, that's what happens when you're connected and talking to a lot of people and helping a lot of people. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So the last final question that I have for you today is, if you have a crystal ball, what do you see happening in the next 12 to 36 months in the investment community or the startup community? Is there a specific vertical that you think things are going to really start to blow up in? Do you think VCs are going to have a lot of money? They're going to start bumping that up and dumping that all in 12 months. Where do you kind of see that scale of things happening over the next 12 to 36?
I think things that are enabling technologies for remote work, remote education, remote medicine, apps are fine, but the stuff that's actually at the plumbing level is, tends to be really interesting. I think things that are physical dependent, like things around commercial. I think commercial real estate is ripe for a fall. Not a big surprise there, but I think there will be vacancies and business closures, and I think the REITs with commercial real estate will have a big problem. Like I said, I think it's, I'm old enough to have gone through a number of these downturns, and when you're in the middle of it, it always seems like it's the worst ever and it'll never end, and it always does end, so it's sort of, like when we got through the nuclear winter in 2001, 2, like the analogy I kept using with my team is, okay, look, it's like we're on a life raft and we're floating, and someday a boat's going to come by and rescue us. We don't know what day. Our job is to be alive when it comes by. And so, for startups right now, it's, hey, get through this. It'll end. You just got to be alive when it ends. And then try to figure out how you can get a disproportionate advantage, when the recovery happens.
I love it. Well, Peter, I want to say thank you very much for your time today. It was brilliant. I learned a ton, and as I always do, I took a ton of notes. Good. And I can say that there's a ton of great lines here that I'm going to utilize somewhere in my day. But I do appreciate all the insights, all the information. I'm sure the audience as well will appreciate it, everybody that's online today or when we do publish it. And to end it, I want to give you the last word. So any last thing you want to share to the startup or investment community, and it's over to you.
Well, what I'll go back to is in the early days when I decided I wanted to work in technology, everybody thought it was a terrible idea. And so one of the principal things to take away is do this because you love it, because you need to do it, not because you think it's an easy path to getting rich. It's like you do this because it's like an itch you got to scratch. It's like, no, it pisses me off. There's this problem. I know I could do this. And when you feel that, like, that's why you do it. People that sort of get into it just for the bucks, it doesn't usually end well.
I love it. Nope, that's fantastic. Well, I appreciate it.
All right, a lot of fun.
Thank you very much, Peter. We'll be in touch, and we're going to let you know when everything's ready to roll. But thanks again for all of your insights and your great lines and stories.
Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Man, you bet. Thanks a lot. Well, we were just on with Peter Horan, and man, that was amazing. That guy really dove into lots of great stories. I love the fact that we got to do some rapid fire questions. Man, I think I'm going to do that from now on. I think that was just a way better way of looking at things. But what I really liked about some of the things he said, and of course you can go back to some of the lines, and I think that really makes a big difference. But he mentioned one, which was lemons ripen more often than peaches. And I might be paraphrasing that. But what I loved about this line is that when you are the diamond in the rough, you're the one that's working hard, you found this problem, and like you said at the end, it's all about being passionate, finding a problem and going after it really hard and making sure you succeed at it. That's exactly with the lemons ripen more often than peaches. And you know what? Those lemons, they're the sour ones. They got all the bad taste, and there's the ones that we're not sure of. But at the end, they're going to push through and they're going to persevere. Why? Because at the end of the day, you got to work hard and you got to find the problem, find that solution, and make it happen. So I really love that about that part of it. He talked about a lot of great things that you kind of have to look at. He went through a lot, obviously, from working back in his Pong days all the way through. And you know what? Adapt, improvise, and overcome. And I think that every day you got to look at life the same way, not just in business, in life everywhere, and just adapt, improvise, and overcome. So today's show, I'm going to throw that out there that that's what this was about. Peter's message is adapt, improvise, and overcome. So enjoy yourselves, keep working hard, and nothing's easy. And we'll see you guys at the next interview.